This is the Decarbonization Disruptors Podcast. I am your host, Matthew Cohen. On this episode of our podcast, I am very pleased to welcome Irina Filippova, Chief Operating Officer at Electrada. Launched in 2020, Electrada provides electric fuel services and EV charging infrastructure, serving private and public fleets that provide flexible, fully managed fleet solutions tailored to fleet operators' diverse financial and operational needs. Irina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, excited to have you. I'm been really following the EV charging infrastructure world for a long time, and I know Electrada's name in the industry, so excited to talk with you about what you're doing there. I wanted to first talk about your background, because when I kind of do some research, I found that you had started in the oil and gas industry for a bunch of your career and obviously moved into sustainability. So whenever I see that, I'm always interested in understanding kind of, with your time in the oil and gas space, how did that experience kind of guide you into the sustainability? What did learning about that world teach you about where you are today?
Great question, Matthew, and thanks for starting off there. In fact, I will say that my career is perhaps testament to keeping an open mind and being ready for transformation, because I've taken several left and right turns along the way. So to anyone who may be tuning in, thinking about their career path, this is definitely a changing time, and transformation is what leads us to where we end up. I joined BP just out of business school, and I was doing my MBA at Yale, whose mission is educating leaders for business and society. And coming into the business career, that was informed for me by my experience working in international politics, and geopolitics was always very important to me. So I was seeking that fit with a future employer who was also focused on business and society. And BP at that time, in the late 90s, was actually a market leader on decarbonization. Lord Browne delivered a historic speech at Stanford University in 1997 prior to the Kyoto Protocol, where he cited multiple headwinds that existed for decarbonization efforts, and how we all had to come together effectively to build more responsible businesses globally. So that truly attracted me to the company. Not only that, BP was very actively invested in alternatives, in renewable energy sources. So there were lots of opportunities to learn from different angles, if you will, of the energy spectrum, and hone my skills in understanding a broader energy landscape as it relates to the overall transformation that the world was going through at that time. So the oil and gas industry experience for me wasn't narrow, if you will. I was very fortunate to have worked in the global headquarters in London and participated in both upstream and downstream strategic projects. But in the end, the pull to learn more and discover more about the renewables was too strong. And in fact, I took a project out in Los Angeles to essentially relaunch BP's green brand at that time in 2007, to really put, again, BP on the map as a leader in decarbonization. And once I've gotten close to the leaders of a sustainability movement, there was no way back into traditional hydrocarbons for me. So it's a circuitous path, as I said, but one that is also very natural for someone who is curious and who thinks beyond kind of just the day, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's a really inspiring story. I'd be curious to know how that manifested itself to you joining Electrada, in part because, I mean, you joined really since its launch, and I imagine it was an interesting experience launching a product like that in the midst of COVID and all the craziness that we were experiencing. So talk about how that came to be for yourself, but then also I'd love to hear what that first year was like launching the service that you offer.
Well, thank you again for taking this turn in the conversation. This part of the story is probably going to be relevant for the working mothers. So I had a 1-year-old when I started working on the Electrada project in the summer of 2019, when it was first founded, to really get the business plan going and get our first round of financing in through the angel investors. And that was a very interesting time and the world, as you know, as the world entered COVID. We started operations here in Cincinnati on the 1st of April, 2020. And I was at the time living in Europe and commuting through COVID until our family moved to the US in 2021. And it was truly, a momentous time in the industry, because I think COVID has divided young businesses into those who survived it and those who did not. And we never really faced the choice of not surviving COVID. We had to go forth and we had to carry out our mission. So very quickly, with a tiny team of just CEO and myself, and then we hired a couple of other people into the team, we started delivering on our promise to our investors. In the beginning, Electrada established its DNA as being very, very deeply rooted in reliability. And as you probably know, in the EV charging industry, reliability has been a pain point. Lots of people talk about technology, talk about different ways of delivering EV charging, but very few actually stand by the promise of delivering high uptime of what we believe electric fuel needs to reflect, especially for fleets to be able to transition to electric vehicles. Why would they do that otherwise? Their conventional fuels is 100% reliable, so why shouldn't electric fuel be close at least to 100% reliable? So reliability has been the DNA of Electrada from the very start. Being the owner and operator of EV charging assets was another part of our DNA. And we've consistently held that promise to our customers now into our 6th year of operations as of this April.
And I'd love to hear more about your offering, specifically on its focus for fleet electrification, because I know that's a growing area. We've done a couple of episodes with people that are kind of focused in that space. So I want to understand what specifically Electrada is doing to cater to the fleet world, where someone who's considering electrifying their fleet could take advantage of.
Yeah, we try to put ourselves in the shoes of fleet operators and logistics managers, because this is their bread and butter. What they are not are energy experts, nor should they be, which is why our offering is focused on the outcome, and that outcome is electric fuel. They don't need to worry about what hardware is being used on their site. They don't need to worry about what software connects that hardware together. All they need to worry about is that within the dwell time of their existing operation, where the vehicle is actually staged at the depot at rest, the driver can plug in and walk away. They don't need to worry about anything else that lies in between, because the product they're buying from us is reliable electric fuel. We worry about the rest. And that seamless and integrated offering isn't actually something that's very common in the marketplace. We hear a lot about different types of solutions, different technologies, both on the hardware side and on the software side. But at the end of the day, the customer is left to figure it all out and integrate the solution themselves. Again, not being an expert in either hardware or software, or the vehicle, which is an absolutely brand new animal, right, to this market, it's very, very challenging for a customer to absorb all the technology risk, not to mention the capital risk that comes with these programs. So Electrada essentially capitalizes the infrastructure deployment. We ensure that the technology we deploy has been fully proved and fully proven. We have a lab where we actually test all of our hardware and software for interoperability with the vehicle, so that we know that the system that we do deliver in the end will perform to that 99% uptime, which we again guarantee to our customers for the duration of their contract with us. So think of it as a fuel offtake agreement with the customers, to where again the outcome that they pay for is reliable electric fuel in a monthly, quarterly, annual installments for as long as they need it. And the design that we provide them with really fits their specific use case. We're not interested in upselling them on a specific piece of technology. We're interested in solving for the use case that they have at their particular depot site with a particular electric vehicle that they've chosen to procure, and given the operational flows that their business requires to be successful.
I wanted to understand more about the kind of the fleet world because I got to tell you, I live in suburban Northeast Ohio. I can't remember the last time I saw an Amazon truck that wasn't electric. We're seeing this huge growth, but obviously that Amazon's a one-off where not everyone can build at that scale. So, what type of fleets are you seeing that are growth areas, and then also for the types of fleets that you're seeing? When fleet owners thinking about deciding electrification, what's kind of the tipping point? What's the biggest sale for them to make that switch? And even what's been the apprehension behind some of the owners who may not quite get their head around moving from fossil fuels to electrification?
Yeah, so we serve all vehicle classes across the board. You may be surprised, but some of our early customers actually were driving Class 8 trucks, right? Most of which were falling under the California regulations. So a lot of these vehicles were actually purchased with some of the incentives that were available for those fleets. Similarly, transit and school bus categories still have incentives available to them, which again will take most carbon off the road, so to speak. But really, in terms of working with different vehicle types, we focus on the Class 3 through Class 5 vehicles, which we feel is the sweet spot from both the cost perspective, reliability perspective, and availability of models on the market. Of course, market changes very rapidly, as you know, and new automakers come out with new models, and one has to really be certain that the use case can be served, in which case, again, Amazon is one of the market leaders in this regard. When it comes to different technologies, I will say that what oftentimes fleets who decide to quote unquote do it themselves don't often realize is that electric vehicle charging technology is not entirely mature yet. It's a maturing market, and there's lots and lots of considerations to give to the types of technologies that are available. And it will continue to change, which is why having the benefit of comparing one technology to another, having a dedicated lab space that we do, where different types of technologies can be tested with different types of vehicles, is extremely advantageous. And most fleets don't have access to these types of facilities. And most automotive OEMs don't necessarily test their vehicles for interoperability before providing them to their customers. When it comes to, I would say, the biggest pain point for customers that we're trying to solve for is, of course, the total cost of ownership. The customer has to be convinced that their TCO analysis of conventional versus electric vehicles really maps out, and they can make a very clear TCO based case to their executives, to their boards, to really create this broad stakeholder support for electrification, because without that, it is simply too challenging for companies to undertake these projects, and one-offs don't truly work, right? You do need to start with some scale to be able to see where adoption may be higher, in which markets, which sites, and which operational flows are best suited for electrification. We have also worked with customers to incentivize them to look beyond California. California has been absolutely a leader in electrification, that also put quite a strain on their utilities, which then resulted in necessarily longer timelines for implementation. So what we're looking at is a broader concept of which distribution centers, which facilities are best suited for electrification, given implementation timeline, given sometimes site locations and specific landlord relationships, right? Whether they are long-term or shorter term, and what landlords maybe have in mind for those sites. And of course, the electricity cost, because that could be a rather significant exposure, especially in markets where there isn't time of use rates available for fleets. So we take all of these components into account and really walk the customer through the logic of how to approach a strategy around wholesale electrification, right, of their fleet, so that it's not a one-off pilot project, which kind of starts and ends and doesn't end up necessarily influencing the overall approach to their transportation, but rather is a holistic strategic program that is phased in bite-sized chunks for the customer to be able to absorb the change and process that change within their organization.
You mentioned total cost of ownership, and I hear that quite a bit from the EV executives, is that seems to be, for whatever reason, the hardest area to sell to clients. Even though when you put all the numbers together, it makes all the sense in the world. Why do you think the total cost of ownership selling point has been has been the toughest area to overcome, even though when you look at apples to apples, it is a more efficient and cost-effective way, but for whatever reason, that seems to be the toughest selling point?
I believe it is because truly customers don't have enough experience with electric vehicles. I recall when I lived in Los Angeles back in 2007, Tesla came out with their Roadster. And I was driving a Toyota Prius at the time, which was the edgy vehicle from the decarbonization
Sure.
perspective. And just looking at that vehicle and looking at how few parts there were and what an elegant solution to kind of this whole idea of transportation based on hydrocarbon fuel it was truly impressive. And not much has changed in terms of the concept of electric vehicle being a lot simpler, being a lot smarter, being a lot cleaner. But again, not enough people have had necessarily individual experience driving an EV. And also some of the EVs coming off the conveyor belt into the market have had some rough starts. Let's face it, not everyone has ended up being a winner in this industry. And even some of the more established players in the market have had to tweak their models. We've heard of some recalls. We've heard of a lot of improvement that needed to happen. Naturally, it's a new product. So the more market confidence around EVs in general builds, the more drivers experience the EV in terms of reliability, in terms of overall, driver experience, how quiet the vehicle is, how easy it is to operate, how smart it is. The easier I think it will be for us to make the argument that the transition makes sense. But overall, I would say that there's natural resistance to taking a risk on something that may or may not work out for the fleet, which is why folks take baby steps in this regard and go with smaller pilot projects rather than kind of wholesale transitioning to electric. And we totally understand that change takes time. And it's sometimes a very painful process and lengthy process, but one does have to be bought into the concept of not only a more capital efficient vehicle, but also a cleaner vehicle. And the overall cost to the customer, we come into the market also as a capital provider. So we want to make sure that while the customer may be spending on the vehicle, at least they don't have to worry about capital investment on the energy infrastructure side, because we actually make that investment as the owner of the end-to-end charging infrastructure on behalf of the customer at their site.
As the technology, as you mentioned, matures, what technology do you see on the horizon that fleet owners can take advantage of, whether it's updated software? We're seeing now, obviously, more technology around putting the energy that the car is taking on back into the building, to the facility, kind of that dual action. So what's kind of the next phase of implementation that you'd like to see for your customers that you think is going to make a big difference?
Yeah, there's lots of great technologies out there. They sound extremely elegant as long-term solutions, and we certainly want them to fulfill the customer promise, be it in terms of V to X, vehicle to everything, and really utilizing that vehicle battery in various circumstances, be it as kind of overall part of the smart living condition that customers are so keen on with AI and other technologies. From my perspective, what would be terrific within the next short-term period would be for, number one, hardware to become a lot more reliable and a lot more standardized so that those service level agreements can truly uphold the 100% or at least 99% reliability uptime that they need to uphold. And on the software side, it's bringing together the fleet management component, the telematics component, the charging management component, and the energy management, all under one integrated roof. What we're seeing a lot from software companies is, if you will, describing the elephant proverbially from their vantage point and not necessarily seeing the whole, again, from the fleet operator's perspective. So more engagement with those folks who need to operate these vehicles, who need the data points to pull it all together for them, and more focus on what is most immediately required for successful operation versus everything in the kitchen sink, right, that can sit on that piece of software, which may or may not be fully useful for that fleet operator. So trying to solve for different asks and for different use cases, but really solving the fundamentals, which is reliability, standardization, and having truly high expectation that charging infrastructure can, again, deliver that final product, which is electric fuel, in the same way that conventional fuel is being delivered today with the same level of reliability and expectation.
I'm always curious to understand, especially from your perspective, and I ask this a lot of clean tech and EV executives, how do we push back against generally the headwinds of the EV revolution? Is it, like you were talking about a few times, just the maturation of the technology to get it to scale, or is it also maybe a messaging issue where those who are against electrification and not quite ready to take that leap are just louder than those who want it? So I'm just curious, what's the biggest headwind that you see and how do we overcome it?
Well, from my perspective, as I say, no man is an island, no country is an island. Electrification of transportation is a global trend. We started Electrada in the face of all the major automotive OEMs globally making a choice in favor of electrification of ground transportation. That's it. And that trend is irreversible. You've seen headlines from Asia, you've seen headlines from Europe, from the rest of the world. Where we are now in the United States, we're not in a leadership position when it comes to electrification. And some of it has to do with the natural dynamics of the market here. But the headwinds will always be there, whether it's from the technology perspective, but whether from the policy perspective. The truth of the matter is a superior product will always get adopted. And what we don't want to see is that we don't want the US to end up truly in the back of the queue when it comes to being at the forefront of technologies that are not only better for our collective environment, but also technologically superior. So that's what we don't want to miss out on. So I think for folks who are trying to decide which way to go, yes, it has to make sense for you from the financial perspective. This is the number one driver for making a choice and making a transition. But I also would urge those in the audience who might be looking at kind of a fork in the road, is now the time to do this or not. Look at the leaders in the industry. Look at how many risks they've already taken and how much they've paved the way for others to take the next step as well. Those lessons have been learned. The industry has matured. as someone who's been in it for the solid 5-6 years now, we can see just how much it has matured and just how much adoption has taken place. So that's a very positive sign. And again, that growth may not continue on a straight upward trend trajectory. We have more of a jagged path, which again is normal in any new technology adoption. But the overall direction is unmistakable from my perspective. So the sooner you join this movement, the better, I believe, because then at least you'll be in the ranks of those who are embracing new technology rather than being left behind.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're certainly trying to embrace it, and then we hope that as it matures, others will too. So this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your insight. In closing, anything you want to say about what's going on now or upcoming with Electrada that our audience should know and get excited about?
Yes, absolutely. It's a pivotal year for us at Electrada. I just came back from ACT Expo in Anaheim, California, which is our industry event. Lots of great energy there as well. Lots of established players still standing strong on electrification, despite the headwinds that you mentioned. We still have a lot of interest from around the world, and folks come from Europe, from Asia, from everywhere really to try and make a play here in the U.S. market. So I'm encouraged by all the great innovations that happen there, by all the great energy that exists in this industry, and also by the continuous improvement on the technology side. So those of you who are going to be stepping into the electrification now are better off than those who perhaps have started earlier on. And it will continue, the trend will continue to improve in favor of the customer.